This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hi everybody, good morning. It's Sabrina Ahmed Qureshi, and today we're going to be talking with Graham Barker. He's a Centre Area Lead and Manager for STEM, talking about the staffing crisis and out of industry and into the fire.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Are you looking for lesson planning materials to kickstart the new term? We've got you covered. The Day is a global online resource that turns the news into lessons. We're offering listeners a free resource on Andrew Tate that you can find on thedaynews.co/Tate. Inspire personal development and critical thinking for your students by downloading the Tate Debate today and feel more confident addressing sensitive topics with your class. Visit thedaynews.co/Tate to find out more.
Good morning, everyone. Right, we have got a show for you today. We've got the lovely Graham Barker joining us as engineering lead and centre manager. Graham's got some excellent experience working across the country, different regions in engineering, construction, and working with all the STEM subjects. Today, we are going to be looking at the industry of STEM and how we get staff out of that industry and into the fires of teaching, and what we can do or how we can retain them. Because at the moment, am I right, Graham, we've got a bit of a crisis on our hands, a bit of a recruitment crisis. So Graham, if you quickly just want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about this crisis.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Sabrina, for inviting me onto your show. Yeah, so as Sabrina said, I'm Graham Barker. I've been in education now for 23 years in STEM areas, and I'm currently role is centre manager and engineering lead for a training provider in Cumbria. So we mainly deal in advanced manufacturing, civil engineering, and we'll also upskill the nuclear industry as well. And we also look at green power and green energy.
So really long reign of experience there, Graham, and thank you for joining us. So firstly, when I'm talking about STEM, could you just give us a little bit of a context about what does STEM stand for and what kind of learners or students are you dealing with in that sector?
Yeah, so obviously it stands for science, technology, engineering and maths, and it covers a wide sector. So from my point of view, it mainly focuses around manufacturing. So manufacturing, engineering, going into the nuclear sectors. It also looks at the construction industry, civil engineering, and obviously all this involves maths and an element of science around it.
So, are we talking about, when you're talking about the teaching crisis or the shortage of staff currently out there, is this an issue that's impacting just college students, or do you see this as a problem impacting school kids, university people going into the careers really? What's the scale of this problem?
I think it's twofold. I think if you talk to the manufacturing and the STEM industries themselves, they have a problem with an aging demographic. So there's actually a recruitment shortage in the actual industry as opposed to education as well. And in regards to education, again, there's an aging workforce out there, and a lot of the current workforce are very tempted back industry. There's a credit crunch. They can get high salaries out in industry. An example, I was talking to a colleague over North East, and he's had some electricians and some bricklayers going back industry on 50k salaries. So it's very difficult to try and retain people with such a high level of skill.
Well, I don't think the current teaching salary is at 50k for most lecturers. I think you need to be in management or some kind of additional post to be earning that amount.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So, well, if we go back to kind of the shortages in industry, surely if there's a shortage in industry, they should be working even harder to train up the next, future workforce. So what are the industries doing to support this in terms of the teaching shortages and the crisis in that area?
Yes, obviously I spend a lot of time in factories, in manufacturing outlets, and they are desperately trying to recruit more apprentices. They accept probably around about 10 years ago they didn't do enough, and they're kind of like suffering now, sort of thing. There was an element where they didn't take on enough apprentices in years gone by, and so it's kind of like a shortfall on the actual on the shop floor, if you like. And there's also statistical evidence in this in the areas of, there's a lot of government papers and a lot of coming out from manufacturing was state where, the real area you're struggling with is at level 4 of a higher technical level. So we see a lot of graduates coming through at a degree level. There's a lot of apprenticeships at level 3, but not quite enough at level 4, level 5, which is what the government's trying to push with HTQs and high level apprenticeships, etc.
And do you think the government support is enough? Do you think it's working? I'm aware, obviously, that there's a drive in just general teaching recruitment. The government's got a massive campaign, but in particular in focusing on specific areas. I know they've got the Taking Teaching Further campaign where they're trying to focus on the technology and the digital skills. Is that working? Is that enough? I know Rishi Sunak's pushing maths, to higher level and offering funding for level 3 maths courses, and hopefully that will feed into the STEM areas. What are your thoughts on kind of what is the government doing actively to support us, and is there enough money going in to fill these gaps?
I think the thing is, Sabrina, you can never put enough money into it, can you? There's a lot of research which says that if every pound you put into higher level education, you get a £4 return in relation to like manufacturing. So you can never put enough money in. Obviously, the government accepts as a problem. For the first time, in September 2022, the government introduced further education workplace return. So therefore, they're asking educators, colleges, providers to actually tell them, to provide a return, how many vacancies haven't been filled within a year. And it's quite startling. There's probably 205,000 staff in AFE sector. 82 of them are direct teachers, and in general, about 5 to 6% of them roles haven't been filled. And if you look in construction, it's around 14%, and there's regional differences. So London, for example, in construction, it's 21%. The Northwest, 21%.
Wow.
So I mean, you're right. They are doing things about it. We've recently added an extra 180 million investment into programs of study. So that's allowed more benchmarking, something we've done in our centre at the moment. So like raise the teaching wage to try and stop people from leaving. In the examples I'll just give you with electrical, and they've also accept different sectors need a bit more money. So there's been an uplift for like subject sector 4 engineering, 5 construction. So if you're a learner in engineering or some of the STEM fields, you will provide more money to the colleges than you would in other areas. That makes sense.
Okay, so obviously a little bit more money is going in. How long
Yeah.
before we see this actually working, or how long do we need to wait to see if this is bridging any of those gaps that we've got?
It's difficult to see, isn't it? Because I mean, they're trying to attract more. I mean, like you mentioned before about some of the campaigns that they have on it to try and attract new staff into roles. And you can't miss them. They're all over. But it does take a while. So even when you get the staff in, to get them up to, a reasonable quality standard to teach. You're probably talking, I mean, what would you say, Sabrina, 2 years, 3 years, something like that? Yeah.
I would say so, yeah, because even when you do your teaching qual, and especially when you're working with industry experts, they're dual professionals, you know what I mean? And places like engineering, you've got to be, up to date and really current with the industry standards. So juggling all of that, and then the difficulties of post-COVID learners and all of the, classroom stuff, I'd say it'd take a good 3-4 years before you're fully kind of capable to take a classroom and do something magical with them and turn them into the future workforce that we need to develop the country, definitely.
I do. I mean, on a shop like you do see there's impact. I mean, certainly where I am at the moment, there's a lot more people in the 50s, mid 50s, coming into teaching.
Right. And is that because they've left the industry because of, I don't know, the teaching? They perceive teaching as an easier gig. It's 9 to 5. It's indoors, less exposure to the weather, the elements, things like that.
I think there's various reasons, Sabrina. I think you're right in all of them. If for example you're in a construction industry and you get to a certain age, you don't want to be out in all weathers. Your body can't really cope with that. But I also think that some people take a pension early. If they've been in manufacturing, they maybe have some of the pension at 55, not quite ready to actually just go back and retire, so want to do some part-time. So we see an uptake in people. We have quite a few staff in my centre who work 4 days a week, so not on full-time, but part-time. And in the sector itself, about 30% of the sector are part-time workers. So you do see a lot of that where people have kind of got a pension from industry, but they don't want to kind of like sit back and retire as such.
So in terms of these staff, right? So we might get them, grow our own, I think, or try and poach them from industry, or wait until they're at that age where they might want to semi-retire almost.
Yeah.
How do we keep them in the education environment and keep them working towards growing that next generation of STEM career workforce?
I think we need a lot of support, because it can be very frustrating if you come from one industry and you're top of your game. You've been there. You're now a senior engineer, well respected, and you now go into a completely different environment. The terminology is different, isn't it? The language we talk is different. We all get used to it, but for people coming into industry, when we talk about ESFA and we talk about different types of funding stream and British values and quality and deep dives, and it's a new language to them, so you have to kind of hold the hand and provide scaffolding. So accept that when they go into a workplace, you're going to have to really, really support them in order to achieve what you need them to achieve. And obviously, so you don't disengage them. It's just like a learner. So you don't end up, disengage them in the early stages when it's very difficult. So you end up losing them, if that makes sense.
And so, when you said, there's people coming out of industry into teaching, and then we're losing them. Where are we losing them to? Where are they going?
I think that sometimes not prepared, because we all know teaching is more than just standing in front of a class and passing on your knowledge. There's a lot to go with it, whether it's paperwork, assessment, open nights, as well as the actual the teaching side of it, writing reports, etc. Sometimes they just don't know what to expect. If that makes sense. And I also think at times as educationalists, we expect a little bit too much of people coming in, and we need to give them a little bit more time, if that makes sense.
So apparently, this shortfall in STEM skills gap, it's costing the economy 1.5 billion per year. Is that what you're seeing out there in industry, Graham? Like the economical cost of not having enough trained experts out there in the field?
Yeah, I mean that's what's reported back. I mean, there's also new areas where, for example, we know about the energy crisis, and the fact that suddenly things have changed in manufacturing and engineering. So suddenly we're going to build some new nuclear power stations, whereas for years we were told that nuclear was dying out. We were going to build a
It's frowned upon. No, we couldn't have nuclear back then.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can imagine what happened to the workforce, where we actually investing in new nuclear technicians. No, we weren't. So now the government's coming and changed that. There's a huge shortfall. Fortunately, in Cumbria, we do have a lot of people experienced in that sector. So there's things like that where when there's major infrastructure projects in where they're paying high salaries, so they take people who are experienced from other sectors into them, because although they're building new nuclear power stations, there's a lot of other things like civil engineering, fabricators, welders, machinists, which actually infill into that. So yeah, it is a struggle, because obviously and productivity wise, we know also that the UK is not particularly efficient. The productivity is not the same as it is in other parts of the actual world. So there's a huge drive to make manufacturing and engineering more efficient. So it's slicker processes. So we can compete on the world stage, post Brexit and that. Yeah.
Brilliant. So Graham, tell us about your kind of experiences in trying to tackle all of these issues in terms of, first of all, getting the staff in, poaching them, grabbing them, training them, and then getting them supported, mentored, getting them in front of the students and making sure the students and the staff are all happy and you're meeting your targets. Like, what are you kind of dealing with out there? Tell us about how it is on the shop floor.
That's interesting, because I recently went to the North East and did some networking with some old colleagues and acquaintances over the North East, and there was middle managers in the room. And as you know, Sabrina, your middle management are the people who keep the wheels of the FE sector rolling over. They're the people who design the curriculum. keep everything moving forward.
Huge role,
Uh,
huge role.
huge role. And so the one member was saying that we'd planned for 190 learners to come through in this construction department, and has actually recruited 260. I mean,
That's a good thing, isn't it?
well, it is a good thing. You would think it's a good thing. Now, when we're doing plans, a lot of this, Sabrina, we don't just pick the figures out of the air. You know, we look at 4-year trends, we look at birth rates, we use LMI data to try and work out whether there's the need, and we do a staffing budget based on that calculation. So to suddenly have 70 more learners, of which you have to understand it's like funding as well. So you won't get the money for that until next year, if that makes sense, which is a little bit. Anybody outside the education environment does not quite understand that. You know, surely if you have surely if you've got the learners in, you get paid this year. No,
no, you have to wait to the following year. Yeah,
which is a little bit crazy to understand, isn't it? And that one of that when this manager was convinced it was because other colleges were putting a cap on their numbers based on the fact that they had staffing issues. So in other words, students were going elsewhere and they were going to him. If that makes sense. So it was creating a lot of problems, and you know, he tells the story of staying back at night, sat at the desk, timetables, trying to provide cover plans, a lot of goodwill from current staff having to teach some extra hours. The vision of it seemed to be a bit more like a war room, a strategic planning room, you know, where you know where they've got these strategic plans and they're trying to plan what's happening next, sort of thing, rather than an FE environment. But yeah, so he was talking about that, and then he was talking about the expense of it, because he was talking about bringing in the reservist, and we know what it means by reservist.
The reservist?
Agency.
Not
cover.
agency staff. Oh no,
Yeah.
not agency staff.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So you know, agency cover can be normally a bit of a nightmare, because you get loads of cold calls. Do you want some staff? And usually at a time when you don't. But then when you're desperate, they suddenly become the heroes in the darkest of times. That makes sense. But it does come at a price, doesn't it, Sabrina? I know and some of these figures are going to shock people who are not in management. So if you're having to bring in an engineering lecturer, it's not, you know, typical price is £54 an hour.
Sorry,
in fact,
how much?
£54 an hour.
Okay. Just for context out there, guys, I obviously recruit agency staff for English and maths and digital, and the average I pay is about £37 an hour.
Yeah, and obviously you're losing staff as well for people wanting to go on the agency circuits, you know, for this type of money. Obviously, all this money doesn't all go to the agency member staff.
No, it does go to the agency themselves.
It does.
So.
It does.
But still, that's far higher than, say, a non-engineering manufacturing expert, because, you know, if you're teaching some of the humanities, the softer skills, maybe you're not going to be getting that kind of money.
100%. There was one case where one of my colleagues was talking about having somebody set up, and you know yourself, Sabrina, it's not a case of just getting on the phone for somebody, bringing somebody in. There's safeguarding, there's DBS checks. This is a long haul to get an agency member of staff in, isn't it? So he had somebody lined up, gone through a whole process, due to start on Monday, got a phone call on Friday, kind of said he's been gazumped by another college. And you sat down, £64 an hour.
Gazumped in agency staffing, right? Okay.
Yeah, so to put that in perspective, you know, if that's £64 an hour, you know, if he's in 30 hour a week, what, a 36-week academic year? Yep. So you know, if my maths is right, it should be being an engineer. I think I think that's around 80. Yeah, no pressure. I think it's around 86k, which is certainly a lot more than some of your principals or vice principal are on. So obviously that puts the college under a lot of financial pressure as well.
And that's
Bear in
just
mind what we
one.
talk.
Sometimes
That's the
you're
one.
talking about, a few agency members of staff picking up different courses or curriculums.
Yeah. And
Wow.
you'd be surprised as well, because in my experience, you'd be quite surprised at the areas where you struggle. So for myself, it's quite easy to go out and pick a PhD qualified engineer, because typically you'll have people who have been to university struggling. We know that only about 64% of engineering graduates get a job in engineering. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
For university, which is quite a startling figure in itself, isn't it? So typically, some of them will come back into education. So if on the academic side of it, for people studying like the HE side, it's less of an issue. But where you struggle is brickwork. You try and find a plumbing lecturer, a brickwork lecturer, electrical installation. That's the areas you struggle, because they're making so much in industry, and there's a huge demand. I don't know if you ever tried to phone a plumber to get somebody to fix. It's not the easiest thing, is it?
No, it isn't. I mean, but what I worry is, or what I wonder even, the government recently announced that, 490 million funding for universities and colleges to deliver better STEM education. Where
Yeah,
is that money
yeah.
going, and what is being done with this? I'm not sure from what you're saying, it's being felt by your colleagues or that networking group that you've been to, if they're having to pay that kind of amount, and they're struggling to cover those costs. What is actually being done with this funding, this money, and is it being siphoned away for specific projects rather than general STEM subjects? Do you know anything about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one. I mean, certainly there's that they are putting a lot of money into STEM through various different funding mechanisms. So, for example, there's SDF funding, which is now being replaced by LSIF funding. Yeah, but it's
Right.
very specific, Sabrina. So, for example, the local skills improvement plans, which are now in place for across all regions, which is typically developed by the Chamber of Commerce. In most cases, there's exceptions, like the North East Automotive Alliance develop LSIPs, and basically they'll say what the skills needs are for your local community, and the government will give each region a couple of £1 million to invest in projects to try and tackle the skill shortage, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's just, so for example, in the northeast, is around green energy. We know we've got Dogger Bank, which is the biggest, when it's all produced, will be the biggest wind turbine plant in the world.
Wow.
We know we've got heavy energy, hydrogen transition and stuff like that. So it's kind of very focused on certain things.
Okay. So it's not just in general teaching and recruitment and things like that. There are agendas attached to the funding and the income streams.
Yes, generally, which kind of does make sense, because also part of that is the upskilling of staff as well. So it does help in that, because you can get staff who are just general engineers who need to be upskilled in some in different areas. That makes sense. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, even I drive an electric car, Graham. Honestly, you wouldn't know how challenging and difficult it is to find a mechanical engine, a mechanic who works on electric vehicles. I've had to drive around everywhere. And then even then they were saying, oh, we've got no one trained to deal with it, so you'll have to go to this and this. So if there's a need, I mean, I'm guessing supply and demand, if there's a massive need, I mean, I've one as a customer desperate for it. Why is it only being recognized now? I mean, we've known this is going to come. We know technology is advancing. We know that all of that stuff's going on. Why is it only being recognized now? And who's advocating for these areas? Are we relying on governments, or are you guys getting a voice? Are you being, supporting the kind of movement? Where are they getting the information from? Who's helping us out here?
That's a tough question. There's all sorts of different people involved, and it is kind of coming together. So, for example, in the northeast, you have various bodies and various groups. So you have, like I say, the Chamber of Commerce, you have the Northeast Automotive Alliance, you have East Coast Energy Cluster groups, where it's basically a partnership of employers, manufacturers who are getting together to try and, for the greater good, to try and solve some of these, and obviously lobby government as well. If that makes sense.
Right.
You got to make UK a big manufacturing organisation with loads of members trying to push for skills developments, etc. So there
And
is,
did the
there-
government actually listen to you guys collectively coming together and saying what the issues are? Is someone actually listen to what the crisis is?
Yeah, like they are putting initiatives in place, such as you'll have heard of skills boot camps. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for industry, there's great programs out there. So when I'm talking in Cumbria to local manufacturers where they've got issues where we've just been talking about, where, for example, they've having to pay high salaries for electrical engineers, but now to try and match mechanical engineers to electrical, they have to upskill them in some electrical skills. So the skills boot camps the governments are putting on helps, because we can put on a 60 guide to learn our course, upskill them, supported by government funding. We don't always get 100% government funding, but it's substantial. In things such as mechanical to electrical training, green energy, civil engineering, green power skills, EV charging structures. By 2035, all vehicles sold have to be electric. So there's a lot of houses that are going to need charging points. And not enough people. So there is initiatives like that where they're, again, focusing on different areas and what the needs are. Not quite sure if that helps the FE staff recruitment, but it does help industry, if that makes sense.
So if it does help industry, will that then have a knock-on effect on staff and recruitment, do you think? Or do you think something altogether is needed to support the staff getting into teaching?
Yeah, it's a tough question, because if it was an easy answer, Sabrina, we wouldn't be in the situation, would we? I think the other thing which is a worrying thing, and I can't remember the full stats of this, but it's actually getting young people, because sooner or later you have to increase the amount of people coming into STEM subjects. And we know that there's a lack of people wanting to go into STEM subjects.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not quite sure, because you talk. I mean, I'm probably the worst person to talk to, because I'm obviously an engineer and get excited by this sort of stuff. You know what I mean? But I think a lot of it is about access to providers in school. Now I know there's legislation around that, but kind of doesn't always work. The other interesting thing which I was reading, and forgive me, I can't remember the full facts, but there's a huge drop in design technology courses at GCSE level.
Yes, there is. Yep.
I can't remember the exact percentages on this, Sabrina, but it was quite startling. Now, if you're doing your options, and my son will be doing his options next year, and if he wants to be an engineer, then obviously yes, he could do GCSE engineering, but it's not the same as actually doing design technology where it's hands-on. The old craft design technology you used to do years ago, where you do metal work and woodwork and you do stuff with your hands and you make things. There's a huge decline. Yeah,
it's my favorite subject.
There's a huge decline in that. So how do you get exposure? How I mean, obviously you've got the UTCs where we do a lot of our stuff, but we're very, that's only going to solve so many problems, isn't
What
it?
are UTCs? Sorry, ignore
University
my ignorance.
University technical colleges, where basically the kind of like schools we specialise around certain areas such as STEM. Yeah, there's one in Workington and in various places, but that's obviously there's not many of them about, and it's really what we need is general schools doing more around design technology and promoting more in engineering and manufacturing.
So I mean, again, I've got relatives, and I remember they used to get grant scholarships. They used to get, placements, and really, my own sister actually, she got a scholarship to study STEM, and
Yeah.
then what they did was really target, different genders, different ethnic minority backgrounds, and things like
Yeah.
that. So I know that there is a push in kind of marketing and advertising, career prospects and salary scales and things like that to the young people from secondary school age. But you're right, without that kind of, first-hand experience, without dealing with it, without going through projects and really understanding what it entails, the students aren't fully understanding what's being offered to them. So do you think that needs to start earlier on? Do you think it's something that we need to be looking at in terms of, let's put it in
100%.
school
Yeah.
curriculum?
And that's one of the things we've been involved in. We're doing that at my current provider, and I've done that, as you all over North East, where we've done STEM projects, where we've had schools coming around, looking at all the new technology, engaging with them. So as providers, we try to do that. I do feel that people, there is for example, if you look recently, the change in student loans, it's going to be much more difficult. It's going to be even harder to pay off your student loan. So in the Blair era, where he wanted to get 50% of people to university, he achieved that, be it after his time. And now there's a push to say, well, actually, yeah, this is great, but actually we need more people and apprenticeships. So I think students are getting a bit canny. They're doing the A levels and they're thinking, well, hang on a minute, I can go to university, try to become an engineer and get all this debt, of which we know the statistics is about 64% of graduates will get jobs, whereas you can get an apprenticeship. The worst thing people say in the local factory, because if you look in a local factory, it's really advanced and high tech. They've got forklifts which drive themselves. It's really high technology stuff. But they can get an apprenticeship in there, and that typical will be a 5-year apprenticeship, and will take them all the way up to degree level, and they get paid. They can go on holiday. They can buy a car, and they won't get any student debt. So I
They're
think
not going to get the debt. That's the key thing, isn't it?
It's a huge thing, because in some cases you're never going to pay that debt off. It's in this round your neck, where we are seeing a lot of students do A levels and go into it. I mean, I have about 4 or 5 in program at the moment where they've come in to do a level 3 program having done A levels, but see the advantages of going into industry. If that makes sense.
Excellent. So are there enough apprenticeship placements out there for the growing need?
I think I mean, I don't think there's ever enough for what we need. But the one of the problems you have is, and it's kind of like a chicken and egg situation, is you kind of most organisations can only take on so many apprentices because you need people to mentor them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if you haven't got the staff,
if you haven't got the staff, you can't do you can't do it. And we have had situations this year where companies said, look, we can't. Great, we can't really take on this year because we're struggling for staff, and we but we need to take on next year because we'll have them people in place. Because again, aged people have retired, they've gone to work somewhere else for more money. That makes sense. So yeah, it's you kind of have enough, but then there's also issues around when you do have vacancies, trying to fill them vacancies, because it's not always as easy as it sounds. You know what I mean?
So what can we do to try and fill those vacancies here and now? Right, we've got this issue. You've got colleagues, you've got friends saying, I've just entered a department now that I'm trying to support in engineering construction. Same thing, same scenario. What you've just mentioned, Graham. We've got staff vacancies, loads, like more than fingers on my hand kind of vacancies. How can we tackle this problem? What kind of ideas have you got, or are there any?
I don't think there's one magic idea where you can you can wave a wand and fix it. But a lot of it is down to, the best advertisement is current staff. If that makes sense, yeah. So a lot over the years, I've gone into a lot of departments, tried to fix them, turn them around, etc. And one of the key allies is having your current members of staff on board. So it's about the culture you generate in your department, the supportive culture,
Which is the same in any kind of subject, really, isn't it?
It is. If you support your staff and and you look after them while still expect them to perform, of course, then they will recommend you and they'll help you with that recruitment process. So culture is really important. Communication is important. Something we do quite well in my current provider, where we have briefings every Monday where the senior management meet on Teams, just half an hour, just to tell people what's going on. Because sometimes the worst thing is communication, isn't it? So I think if you can get that high performing culture into your provider and into your college, I think that will help a lot, because it'll attract people. Someone's going to lose out, because if you're attracting people, it might be industry that's losing them, and it might be another college. But selfishly, your department will thrive. If that makes sense.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Are you looking for lesson planning materials to kickstart the new term? We've got you covered. The Day is a global online resource that turns the news into lessons. We're offering listeners a free resource on Andrew Tate that you can find on thedaynews.co/Tate. Inspire personal development and critical thinking for your students by downloading the Tate Debate today, and feel more confident addressing sensitive topics with your class. Visit thedaynews.co/Tate to find out more.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Just Stop Oil have spray painted universities across England. The climate campaigners used orange paint to coat buildings at the universities of Leeds, Manchester and Cambridge, according to a report on the BBC News website. The latest protests came after other universities across the country were also targeted. Just Stop Oil say the protests are against the UK government's plans to licence new oil and gas projects. The BBC report featured comments from a spokesperson for University of Leeds, which said that whilst they support the right to legal protest, they were hugely disappointed that the results had been vandalism. At the University of Cambridge, a protester painted the neo-Gothic King's College orange and was confronted by members of the public. The majority of protesters have been arrested and charged with criminal damage. After the Tory party conference, attention turned to Labour's proposals for education should they be elected. Bridget Phillipson, Shadow Education Secretary, said a Labour government would upskill non-maths specialists in primary schools to create the maths equivalent to phonics. The announcement marks a clear dividing line with Conservative policies, with Labour focused on the youngest school children, whilst Conservatives have focused on extending compulsory maths teaching to 18. The curriculum review would also be tasked with bringing maths to life and directing teachers to show children how numeracy is used in the world around them. The plans have been tentatively welcomed by the NAHT, and General Secretary Paul Whiteman said it was vital that Labour builds upon the excellent maths teaching that is already taking place. Jeff Barton of Askell added, ensuring that primary schools have the funding for the resources they need was vital to improving attainment. After the distressing news of events unfolding in Israel, many news outlets have reported on government plans to support Jewish schools with extra security guards. Security and police patrols have already been increased, but the government has given £3 million in funding. Measures taken by some schools already include pupils being told to remove blazers and school trips being postponed. The BBC also reported that 3 schools have closed due to concerns. The Community Security Trust CST, which provides protection for Jewish communities in the UK, said there had been 139 anti-Semitic incidents since the recent attacks on Israel. At this time last year, there had been only 21 incidents. A government spokesperson said it was very concerned a small number of Jewish faith schools had temporarily closed, and that it would be working to support them to open safely. Finally, BBC Wales education correspondent Bethan Lewis writes that children as young as 7 or 8 are using social media, according to a major survey in Wales. Responses from more than 32,000 children aged 7 to 11 suggest almost half use social media sites or apps a few times a week. Public health experts said the data was concerning, as most social media carry minimum age recommendations of 13. Parents also responded, with many saying they found it hard to strike the right balance between the benefits and pitfalls of smartphones. Full details of the survey can be found on the BBC Wales section of the news website. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
So that's, you provided some really kind of true and very real scenarios there about, the culture and really selling your organization, and word of mouth is a powerful thing, isn't it?
It is 100%.
If you're leaving industry to join an organization and say, do you know what, they really supported me into teaching, blah, 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 they're going to go tell, Joe Blogs and spread the word. Is there anything that you would recommend, the middle managers, senior leaders should do more so to kind of make that environment more tempting and appealing for people to leave industry for?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about culture, but it's how you create that culture. And we've also talked, haven't we, Sabrina, about supporting staff coming into teaching. I think that's very important. So it's if a learner came in, in education, we talk about scaffolding, don't we? We talk about identifying that learner need, putting support in place to make sure until that learner has the skill, you're supported to get to where they need to be. And this should be no different for staff. So when new staff from industry are coming in, you need to provide them with basic information. So you provide them with your schemes of learning, provide them with the risk assessments in the workshop, and also, as well as a basic teaching structure, you provide them with schemes of learning. Talk about how you assess. It's just fundamentals, isn't it? But also you need to mentor them around the culture, because there's a big difference between being in education and being in industry. The culture is slightly different. The professionalism is slightly different. So in order to thrive, you kind of have to look at the initial support in the workshops, the teaching, but also around the cultures of the organisation as well, to make sure they're fitting nicely. There's no surprises.
And is there anything that you think you've seen as really good kind of practice that you think, oh wow, more people should be doing this to keep the retention up, or anything you would recommend, or anything you want to say to future people out there listening who might be tempted to come into the out of industry into the fires of teaching?
In relation to retention of staff, Sabrina, is that what we're saying?
Yeah, but bringing them in, what have you seen that's good, and what might lure them away?
I think it's that level of support for staff, and also managing expectation as well. I mean, to give an analogy, we need to manage expectations around what we expect of new staff. It's quite easy.
Where's the time to do that, though? Come on. If you're talking about a shortage, normally you needed that member of staff, 3 weeks ago. Is that realistic, do you think? Or are you seeing someone do that so well in some way?
I think because it's about just kind of buddying them up and providing the level of support in which to do it, and also, like I say, managing expectation. For example, sometimes we forget about the basics. For example, my daughter is going to swimming lessons. Yeah, we don't expect her to jump in the deep end and be able to just say, well, she either sinks or floats. Do you know what I mean, Sabrina? Yeah.
You have to do teaching, though, don't you? That's
exactly,
the
problem. Exactly. But this is what we often do in education, don't we? We bring a member of staff in the probation period. We observe that member of staff, usually linked to either the ETF, the Education Teacher Framework. It may link it to the EAF. We may do it to the Initial Teacher Training Framework. And then we'll be surprised when it actually isn't perfect. They're not gold medalists. So, my daughter, when she goes swimming, she starts off at level 1, not level 7. She puts armbands on, and then slowly her percentages comes up. So I guess it's managing the expectation around, you give them that structure. I guess the important thing is that it's about the intent and the impact. We talk about this intent and impact, don't we? The 3 eyes in education. The 3 eyes. Everyone knows about the 3 eyes, right? So usually, what does a student want coming in? So in most cases, a student coming into vocational wants to pass the course, they want to learn a skill, and usually want to progress onto apprenticeships. Some may want to progress onto university. So that is very much the intent. Yeah. The impact is, have we achieved that? Yeah. And in the middle, you've got the implementation, which can be a bit woolly for, maybe not ideal for a new member of staff. So that's where the scaffolding comes in to say, well, actually, we know that they're not going to be seasoned professionals, and we know they're not going to go in and expect the same standard of fluidness as you would from somebody who's been in the game for 10 years. It's the same as you wouldn't expect somebody new to be able to take a free kick and score the same way David Beckham has, who's been practicing for the last 10 years.
Well, I mean, they might have really good subject knowledge, and that, they might not excel in that classroom, but it might be in the workshop, it might be, next to a wind turbine or something. Yeah, totally.
100%. But as managers going in to observe, you kind of need to manage your expectations around how well they implement it, and then put scaffolding in, so that areas where they're weak doesn't impact on the learner progression. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? So like you get the same result. It may not be as pretty, but over the course of time, you'll develop that person. So often I see new members of staff coming in, getting observed in the same way you'd observe somebody who's been in the game for 10 years, and get a bit disillusioned by it. So it's about just the same as my daughter, or your daughter Sabrina, when they're going to learn to swim. It's about accepting that, and the new teacher training reforms also looks at saying, well, actually, you kind of need to get the basics right, don't you? level 3 before you go into level 7. Yeah, and again, the new teacher training reforms that have just come out is looking to how to make teachers actually better from an early start. You know what I mean? Which is quite interesting.
Excellent. So we are coming to the end of our time, Graham. So I'd like to kind of give you another bit of mic time to kind of share anything else that you'd want to tell us about the STEM area and the current state of affairs. If there is anything.
No pressure, Sabrina. No, it's I guess it's an exciting area to be into. There's a lot of developmental changes, a lot of investment into colleges. So, if you're technology minded like myself, it can be extremely rewarding. There's investment in colleges now for new kit. Also, there's a lot of something we haven't mentioned is about collaboration with industry. There's in my previous job we're members of the IoT, the Institute of Technology, and one of the things they do really well is to bring industry and education together. So therefore, again, another way of supporting staff.
Really practical skills that you can just, pick up off the shop floor and take it straight there, which you don't always get in all courses. You don't get that experience out there. And often the complaint is, you got a degree, you got a qualification, but can you do the job? Whereas I suppose people in your kind of sector here are getting on the job training, they're getting practical skills that they're picking up. Using real equipment, which I think is part of the allure of becoming a STEM student. So that I think that's something that when you said to me DT and all of that, that's what I remember. Getting my hands on a drill, making holes, getting saw. That was the best part. And I think from a student point of view, that's probably why you have such an influx of students going into those kind of sectors. It's just a shame we can't get qualified teachers in front of them quickly enough. So fingers crossed this show is going to entice some listeners out there to upskill or retrain or consider spreading the word about STEM and the importance of it, and maybe you can embed it into your own curriculum. Maybe you can discuss it with your students if your teachers out there, or if you know anyone who's thinking of what to do next career-wise. There's massive opportunities here, as Graham mentioned. Lots of funding going in. And I think if anyone's got any questions, I'm sure you can catch Graham on LinkedIn and drop him a message. And I'm sure he'll be happy to help. Or you can message me and I'll do my best as well. But that is all we have time for today. So thank you once again, Graham. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you.
Cheers.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.